Hey everyone, I'm Zadora, and today we're going to be talking about passive and active forms. They're a really important topic. So first, I just wanted to show you how we um, go from active voice to passive voice because that's like the main key for knowing how to deal with those voices. So it's also like usually what the questions are about. They usually gave you a sentence in the active voice and they ask you to put into the passive voice or vice versa. So let's take a look at the first one in the present simple. So the active voice would be they take the photos, and the passive one would be the photos are taken. What are the differences you should notice? Well, the verb, which was in the present simple, is not in the present simple anymore. Take became taken, so it's now in its participle. So that's important. And also, we added the verb to be in the present simple if you pay close attention. So it's actually what happens in every single one of them. We add the verb to be. So in the first one here, we actually had to have the verb to be anyway and put it in the present simple because the main verb would become in its participle, but we didn't have any other auxiliary verb. And the auxiliary verbs are usually like are, have, but we always have to add the verb to be to make the passive voice. So in the first example, we added the verb to be in present simple. In the second one, we added the verb to be in the present continuous. So we have to add it like being with ing because it's continuous. In the third example, present perfect, we also added the verb to be as being. So if you pay close attention, the only difference between active and passive voice in terms of structure is that the main verb in the active voice, it's gonna become in its participle. We're gonna have to turn it into its participle. And we have to add the verb to be. Even though you already have verb to be, you also have to add another one. So for example, in the present continuous, we already had the verb to be in the active voice, but we also had to add another one to make the passive voice. So even though there are already a verb to be there, it doesn't mean you shouldn't add. You should. And another thing that it's interesting to point out is that when you are using the passive voice, you don't know who is the subject. Like here in the active voice, we know the subject was they, but in the passive voice, we don't know that. We know the objects are the photos, but we don't know who took the photos. So that's also why you use the passive voice. Probably when you don't know the subject, or like, I don't know, you are solving a mystery and you really don't know the subject. So you have to use everything in the passive voice, unless you want to, I don't know, point out that, well, maybe someone like that or things like that. Just to finish up, future, past, active, and passive voice. And here are the infinitive, perfect infinitive, and gerund. Sometimes you're going to use them, but usually most of the time you're not going to use them. So as you have noticed, as we have noticed before, the only difference is the main verb turns into its participle, and we have to add the verb to be. So always add the verb to be, always turn the main verb into its participle, and delete the subject. You don't know who's doing the action, but you do know like what is suffering the action. Like the photos are the object, they are suffering the action, and the object it's gonna become before, it's gonna appear like before the verb. So that's another thing you should pay close attention to. Actually, active and passive voices in English are really similar to the ones we use in Portuguese. So it should be like clearer for you now because you just have to remember like two main things. The main verb is gonna be in its participle, and you have to add the verb to be. It doesn't matter if you already had a verb to be, you're gonna have two now. You have to add a verb to be. And just like some side observations, we don't have the subject, so we don't know who did the action. And we have the objects, but we have to put them before the actions itself. So the photos, which are the object, in the active voice, they appear after the verb take, but in the passive voice, they appear before the word take. And that was basically it. So now we just have to practice a little bit. So I borrowed some examples, and we're gonna try to find them out. So here the example is like you should say if it's passive or active voice. So what is my tip for it? If you have the subject, it's gonna be an active voice. So just look for the subject. If you don't know who's doing the action, then it's the passive voice. So here, do we know in the first example who's doing the action? Yes, we do. It's they. So we know it's gonna be an active voice. Second example, she is reading the newspaper now. We also know who's reading the newspaper. It's she. So we have an active voice. 3. These cars are produced in Japan. Do we have the subject? Do we know who is producing the cars? No, we don't. So it's passive voice. Fourth example, Alan teaches geography. Do we know who teaches geography? Yes, it's Alan. So active voice. Fifth question, German is spoken in Austria. Do we know who speaks German in Austria? Have we mentioned in the sentence? No. So we don't know who's speaking German. We just know it is spoken. So we have a passive voice. And here's like the answer sheet. And the next example is to like form passive voices from active voices. So here in the first example, we have Julia rescued 3 cats. So what did I tell you we had to do? We had to put the object first. So we already know we're going to start with 3 cats. And we have to add a verb to be. 3 cats were rescued. And that's it, because you have like to take off the subject. We don't know who rescued the cats in a passive voice. So the answer for the first example is 3 cats were rescued. That's it. Second example, the students handed in the reports. So the object has to come first. What is the object? Reports. So the reports handed. It's the main verb. We have to add the verb to be. So the reports were handed. And that's it, because we cannot say who handed it. Third example, what is the subject? The blue car. So we put it first. The blue car, the verb is crashed, but we have to add the verb to be. So the blue car was crashed. And that's it, because we don't know who crashed the car. And here is the answer sheet. Oh, also, in the answer sheet, great thing, by Julia, by the students. These are passive voices in which we actually know who did the action. We just chose to do the passive voices for some reason. So if you know who did the action but you still want to use the passive voice, you should put like by and then the subject. For example, here in the second example, we have the students as the subject. So in our passive voice, we add by, just to show who is doing that, and then we add the subject, the students. And the same thing in the third one. We know the subject is Maria, so we just added at the end by Maria. So that's like, that was it for today. If you have any questions, those are the references. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us in WhatsApp or Google Classroom. We're gonna have exercises on passive and active forms available in the classroom for you to do. So if you are not in our WhatsApp group nor in the classroom yet, the links are in the description. So feel free to join us anytime you want to. And yeah, that was it for today. Thank you so much for your time and bye. Good luck.